pressure off the edge, and it's intercepted. D'Angelo Pons roll out the big red carpet. Touchdown, Indiana.
It's time for the big red carpet. Here's your host, Rhett Lewis.
That's it once again. Guy Haberman, appreciate the love on that call right there for D'Angelo Pons. And, somewhat ironically, without D'Angelo Pons this week, Indiana still finds a way to get it done against Iowa. Delay or not, for victory, even at the very end, it is a victory nonetheless. 5-0 now are your Indiana Hoosiers as they head into the bye week with a rousing victory in their first road contest, a very hotly contested game, obviously a very physical and tough game in Indiana. And in some cases last year would not have won a game like that because of the way and the style in which it was played. And this year's Indiana's team, one of the reasons why they are different. So with that, great to be back here with you. Another episode of the Big Red Carpet, off and running. I am Rhett Lewis, and I am fired up to be sitting here with you 5-0 talking about your Indiana Hoosiers. This was a gritty game, right? This is one of those games in the Big Ten where you go on the road and you have to find a way. And that's what Indiana did. Tough teams do that. Gritty teams do that. Championship teams do that. Keep that in mind as we go forward this season. Very similar to what we're going to be talking about next week in our big Oregon preview. Oregon was a tough and gritty team in that whiteout, going into that environment in a 3-3 game at the half, going down and losing all the momentum in the last part of that game, but coming back and winning it in overtime. That's going to be a fun one. And we'll get to that. We'll talk a little bit about that game between Oregon and Penn State at the end. We'll talk to Nathan and Peter a little bit about what they thought from the Iowa game as well. As they are representing the fan voice as we get some of those comments and questions. We're going to dig deep into this game, offense, defense. I've watched all the tape, even special teams a little bit. Don't want to forget about Nico Radicic. Wonderful display of clutch kicking in this one. But obviously we'll go in depth on what went right and what went wrong for Indiana, both offensively and defensively. And look, I come away with it again, just mostly very positive, even though it wasn't a 63-10, victory. But Kinnick is a very tough place to play. Iowa plays like a top 5 team in the conference at home. They just do. And so to go in there and win that game was huge. But let's start with the end, which was one of the weirdest endings of a game that should have been a non-thing that I can remember. Like that should have been the most low blood pressure into a hard-fought, tight, close game with those kneel downs. So, again, as Coach Cignetti kind of explained, the purpose of that is Iowa had their timeouts, right? And there were still however many seconds were left on the clock. You wanted to milk as many seconds off the clock with each kneel down, knowing that they were going to call the timeout, and then you could just run the thing out, right? And so that's what Fernando Mendoza was trying to do. You see on the very first snap, he takes the snap. He's kind of a little bit crouched, right? And he's backing up. He's not kneeling yet. He's waiting for the Iowa defense to close in. And he would then, before he takes a hit, would just go drop to a knee. And so instead of wasting 2 seconds, you would waste maybe 6-7 seconds and continue to milk the clock. And then the whole thing becomes mathematic at the end. Well, out of nowhere, the referee blows the whistle, like almost as soon as Fernando starts backing up and didn't take the knee immediately. And I was like, what? Why did he just do that? But now the reaction from Curt Cignetti was far more animated, and rightly so. I mean, this is a play that Indiana practices. Like, this isn't just, we drew this up. And no, they practice this every week and all throughout camp and spring. And this is called victory delay. As Coach Cignetti mentioned, he wanted clarification from the Big Ten. I went and got clarification from some of our rules experts at Big Ten Network. So the sentiment is that what was called was a bad interpretation of the rule. And let me just finish going. I'll go through the 3 plays and the safety situation as well. And then I'll give you the definition from the exact line item in the rule book about what was ultimately called and how poorly it was interpreted. Second down, then after a bunch of explanation back and forth, Fernando just takes the knee immediately. right? And then Cignetti's like, well, what are we doing? Well, you could see Fernando on the tape, like turning to talk to the official. He's like, wait, so you're telling me I can't do this? I can't do this? What do I have to? And he just takes the knee, and then they call the timeout. And then on third down, Indiana and Fernando then tries the victory delay again, kind of backs up, waiting. And again, the official blows the whistle prematurely. And we're like, what is going on here? So now, Iowa takes a timeout, and now Indiana's got to do something on fourth down, as opposed to just letting the clock run and bleed. It shouldn't even had to run a fourth down play. And so then your choices when you're sitting there on fourth down with, I think it was like 4 seconds left, you practice taking an intentional safety, right? Because when the time runs out, you do not have to make that free kick and the game just ends and the 2 points doesn't matter that you give them in the safety. Now, there is a little bit of a risk. Like, what if Fernando gets caught? Caught as he's running? What if he fumbles and then all of a sudden, especially since he was caught in the end zone and fumbles and, and they recover for a touchdown, that could have been a disaster. The other option was you could have just had Fernando run backwards a little bit and then just launch the ball out of bounds as high as he possibly could, because the clock continues to run until it hits someone or something. That, to me, maybe would have been a safer option. But, like, what if he missed throws? What if there's a lot of variables there. And so I understand why they ended up taking the safety. And no, friends, no, it was not to preserve some sort of gambling situation. It was not to break everyone who had their money on the line. Like, gambling had nothing to do with the safety at the end. Can we just put that to rest? Okay. Sorry, friends out there who had certain wagers that were spoiled with the way that thing ended up. Blame the officials. Okay. And so with that, I will get to the letter of the law. Rule 4.1.3 under the ball declared dead heading in the rule book. You got to go down then to letter O. Letter O says when a ball carrier receives the snap and simulates placing their knee on the ground. That's it, because it's under the ball declared dead. So when a ball carrier receives the snap and simulates placing their knee on the ground, it is immediately a dead ball. The reason that rule is in there is so that you cannot, like, let's say at the end of a half, you can't just simulate you're taking a knee, defense lets up, and bam, you got a receiver streaking down the field, and you just throw it, all the way down the field, and it's a trick play for a touchdown. Similar to, like, you can't have a player in a hideout position simulating he's coming off the field, then he stops right before the sideline, you throw it to him, and then he goes. That is trickery, that is deception, and they don't want that in the game, obviously, for good reason. And so you can't do that. And so that's what the official, in my opinion, and in the opinion of other officials that I've talked to, that's what they were calling. They were whistling Fernando dead because they felt like he was simulating taking a knee. And by rule, that should be a dead ball. But that's not what he was doing. He was simply backing up. This is something that has been done. Indiana is not the first team. Fernando is not the first quarterback to execute a victory delay. And so the fact that it happened twice is insanity. The first time, and from what I understand, they got two different explanations from the officials, one on the sideline, the head referee, but that should have been figured out immediately between Coach Cignetti and the referee. And I think the referee's clearly in the wrong here. But they should have gotten together. It's like, no. We are not deceiving anyone. We are just trying to run more time off the clock. And the fact that it happened a second time is absolutely bananas to me. Anyway, that's how all that ended up happening. Much ado about nothing at the end. It's an Indiana win, right? And here's how they got there. Offensively, let's talk about this. This was a very aggressive game plan by Iowa and their defensive coordinator, Phil Parker, who's one of the best in the business. They play some of the most disciplined and tough defense and aggressive defense in the country. There was only one team that blitzed with a higher percentage of passing plays this week in college football than Iowa. Second highest blitz percentage of any team in college football. 72% of Indiana's pass plays, Iowa blitzed, brought extra rushers. That's insane. That's a lot, right? So that's a lot to deal with for an offensive line as they were trying to figure that part out. And then if you go back and compare to Indiana's first four games, they averaged around 40% blitz rate or below. Like between 30 and 40% is about how teams were trying to get after Indiana. And so you went up to 72% in this game. That's a lot on the plate to that offensive line. And look, I think in a lot of ways, they actually held up pretty good. Sure, Fernando got hit and he got beat up a little bit more than you would have liked to have seen. But against that much pressure, you're just not going to be perfect. I think there were some individual matchups that were not favorable in this game. I think Khalil Benson had some reps that he would love to have back against Llewellyn, who's a really good player for Iowa and showed you why a number of times. I think Bray Lynch had a couple of snaps in there that you'd like to have back. Everyone had a couple of them here. But for the most part, in the backs need to be better in pass protection, especially up in those A gaps where some of that pressure was coming from the second and third level. They had a couple good ones, but more often than not, they were beaten or just missed or got, out. That is a hard responsibility for a back, but still they've got to be able to provide Fernando a little bit more in those situations. So they got to be a little bit stouter there. I imagine that will be a big emphasis on this bye week as they go forward, getting ready for Oregon. So the blitz was definitely something that Indiana had to deal with. And Fernando, while he had some ups and downs there, I thought ultimately was excellent. I really do. I mean, like for the amount of pressure he was facing compared to what he had seen the first 4 weeks of the season, I thought he performed really well. In fact, you saw it on my my X post before this episode. If you haven't seen it yet, you need to go check it out right now. It's where I can give you the video without getting it, redacted from the internet. So I've got these 3 throws on there. From the first half and a couple from the second half, including the game winner, that were 3 of the best throws you will see in college football so far this year. 2 of those throws, and the game winner was not like an incredibly high degree of difficulty throw, but it was a clutch throw because it was a zero blitz situation, and he had to make it and had to be perfect, and it was. But the other 2 throws are top 10 NFL quarterback right now throws. That's how good. The first one was the corner route from E.J. Williams, in which Fernando throws the ball. This was the 15th play of the game. I have it written down in my notes here. Maybe the throw of the year in college football. It's a deep hole shot. He throws from the left hash, 10-yard line, and then hits E.J. Williams, drops it, I'm telling you, in the bucket. It is a beautiful thing. Again, it's out on my X post at Rhett NFL. If you're following, if you're not, you need to. I'll give you some more of those clips as we go throughout the week. But he throws this thing 44 yards in the air on a dime, just absolutely drops right in the bucket for E.J. Williams. Incredible throw. I think on the broadcast, Paul Burmeister, who I think is really good, said E.J. Williams was wide open. It was not a wide open throw. He was in the hole, but there was a closing defender from underneath E.J. Williams and then a safety coming in over the top, and that ball had to beat both of them, and it did. And he had the time to do it because probably Kalen Black's best blitz pickup of the day was early on here, where he comes and he eats up grass. So he sees a blitzing defender coming right up the middle, right? And he, instead of catching that defender, right, and trying to hold on, he meets him near the line of scrimmage, eats up that grass, and delivers a blow instead of catching it, and provides Fernando enough time. But I'm telling you, that throw is incredible. Awesome throw. Love that one. Next one, we go down into the, I think it was fourth quarter here. Roman Hemby misses kind of felt like a cross dog, like a A-gap blitz, right? He had a linebacker kind of switching and kind of running a game and coming opposite the defensive tackle. And, Hemby just kind of whiffs. And so you've got a free runner right in Fernando's face. He sees it. He steps up and hits Elijah Surratt on that seam route. Just in stride perfectly, gets into Iowa territory. It was a big play and a big drive for IU. That one was awesome. And then lastly, the game winner. This one, I give a lot of credit to Mike Shanahan on this one too, because you would start to see, Coach Signetti calls it house splits, right? You heard him say that in the post-game presser. It's a zero coverage look, right? Where they're sending everybody. They've got man-to-man coverage behind it, and then there's no deep safety help, right? There's nobody beyond the guys that are in man-to-man coverage. And now sometimes they will give the appearance, and they did this a couple of times, of blitzing everybody that's not covering someone, but then they drop one guy back out just to kind of be almost like a spy robber type. In case, Fernando tries to just dump the thing off real quick, they pick it off, and it's one of those types of plays. But this was fantastic. Had to have it, right? It's play 62 of the game, and Coach Shanahan had the slant route, right? A quicker route from Elijah Surratt, where he gets inside on off coverage. And he had to get inside, and he did. Fernando put it on the money. Surratt, strong player, breaks the tackle, and he's off to the races, and it's perfection for the game winner. Like that stuff, man, that's high-level football, right? That's high-level football from play call to execution, and I loved how Fernando and Elijah Surratt knew it, recognized it, understood it, and made the play in a pressure-packed situation. And Fernando, man, had taken some big hits in this game, too. For him to stand in there, know it's coming, know he's going to get hit, that was... Like, it's not as clean, it's not as beautiful, right, overall as the last two games, right, Indiana State and then obviously Illinois. But I was almost more impressed with Fernando in this game, right, because of the hits he took. He just kept taking them and getting back up and going out there and continuing to make big-time throws. So shout out to Fernando, man. That was just and he had countless other throws that were fantastic in this one. Now, I know that there's been some talk about, maybe this being a more of a conservative game plan. I think understanding that you were going to get blitzed so much in this game, and that's how it was going, and they were just pressuring so much on every one of these throws, that you're like, all right, we got to slow this down a little bit. We got to be able to run the football so our quarterback's not taking a bunch of hits. I wouldn't necessarily call that conservative. I would call that smart. I would call that like, hey, we're going to, let's understand the flow of this game, understand the way the defense is trying to attack us, and what's our best path forward here, to give ourselves an opportunity to win it at the end. And that's what this was to me. This was not like, oh, let's turtle and, run the football and just not really try to push the ball down the field. That's not in this team's DNA. That's not in Curt Cignetti's DNA. And now he sets the messaging for the game plan every week. And then Coach Shanahan, Coach Whitmer, and Coach Bostad, and that whole staff go in there and, they tailor the thing up and they make it look the way that, Coach is kind of setting the messaging for it. And then, they build that scheme to fit that message, and they go forward and play. And so it is a cohesive, from top to bottom effort to game plan it and then to execute it. Now, sometimes you got to wipe the thing, if it's not working, or, if the defense is starting to show you a bunch of stuff that you haven't seen before, you got to make adjustments. I thought they did that a number of times in this game, but just continuously impressed with the way that Indiana has played offensively. And again, I think last year's offensive line may not have performed and held up as well. Again, there's plays that everybody wants back. Had Bray Lynch beaten for a sack early on in the game. You had a read option that was stuffed because of penetration in the inside a couple of times. Like, you had some things, that you didn't love, but ultimately they made the plays when they had to. So I give the offensive line some credit for that, for sure. I just thought, initially, great way to set the tone early offensively, with the RPO from Omar Cooper, who has Riley Nowakowski blocking for him for about 6 seconds on that play before Omar's actually able to get the ball and get to where Riley was for a big gain. And then on that smash corner route from Omar Cooper, just again, another great throw to kind of set the tone early right there. One of the problems here for the offense, before we get to the defensive side of things, was short yardage. Now, this was a problem early on in the year against Old Dominion. Thought maybe it kind of got solved a little bit. There were some good short yardage plays against Illinois. I thought Iowa did a really nice job playing with their crowd, right? Understanding the effect of the crowd and the noise, which did have an effect on short yardage. And I'll tell you why here in a second. I thought they also did a nice job defensively, understanding the way that IU wanted to operate in short yardage, looking at the way that they did it against Illinois, and, kind of adjusting and, having some some of their scheme based off the way that Indiana schemes it up, and understanding that, recognizing it, and trying to play off it and take advantage of it. And I thought they did in a couple of ways. So a couple of these short yardage plays here, you could see it. Riley Nowakowski is attached at the end of the offensive line, and he's got his left hand. He's on the right side. He's got his left hand on the outside leg of the tackle. Right. In one case, it was a tackle. In another case, it was Zen Michalski. It was the sixth offensive lineman, and he's not going. Riley's not moving until he feels Zen or that tackle move. Right. And so it's a chain reaction situation where the center should always be the first one, right? Because he knows the count, he's snapping. And the further you get away from the center, the harder it is to hear, and the harder it is to be in sync. So the guards, on one of the short yardages, if you freeze it, everyone's moving. Everyone has already moved a step, including the Iowa defensive front, because they're going on first movement from the ball. They're watching the ball. As soon as that ball moves, they're going. The further you get away from the ball, you can't see it, right? So that was part of the problem here. So I freezed it on one of these plays, and I'll put it out on my Twitter here in a little bit. But everyone has taken a step, and Michalski and Riley are still in their stance. And so they get beaten across their face inside because they are laid off the ball, and Iowa can see the ball, and they are, boom, like aggressive. As soon as the first mill of movement of that football, they are off and running, and they essentially ruin the play right away. Had no chance. There's a couple of times in short yardage where that happened. I think it happened once with Khalil Benson on the right side, where you're just a half second late coming off the ball. And in football and in short yardage, every little bit counts. Now, there was another time in short yardage where it felt like the play developed a little bit slowly. And so when you have a slow reaction from the offensive line and the running back isn't getting the ball on a quick hitter right away, it's a recipe for disaster. So that happened as well. And then one of those plays we highlighted, if you go back and listen to last week's episode, play where Omar Cooper is going in motion. He's coming back at the snap of the ball. Boom. He's almost like a lead blocker trying to seal out the edge defender. That happened in this game too, except it was Elijah Surratt who comes in motion and comes back. And on one of the short yardage plays, you could see the edge defender on the backside of the play as Surratt is coming. He goes in motion, and then at the snap of the ball, he reverses and goes back to the other side. Man, that edge defender off the backside crashes down so hard, right? Because they'd seen that on tape. That he gets to the running back. I forget which back it was, but gets to the back like before he could even get going. So again, it's some good scheme stuff from Iowa there, recognizing what Indiana wanted to do. The crowd and the noise playing a part in getting a little bit late off the ball. That'll be something that Indiana has to deal with against Oregon, because it will be even louder at Autzen Stadium. I can guarantee you that. So those are a couple of things from the offensive side of the ball. Defensive side of the ball, really proud of the way that unit played. Man, I'm telling you what, one thing that you got to start with is D'Angelo Pons. Again, sounds like he's going to be okay for Oregon. He was stressed out in this game, didn't play. But with that dude getting hurt late in the week, that changes and the game plan had already been installed, had already been repped. Like, that changes your coverage plan so much when that guy's not available, because he is at the center of all of it. And so now you move Rylan Gandy in, who's played sparingly, and look, that's what you signed him, and that's what you brought him over from Pitt to do, is to compete. Probably thought he was going to be starting the year, but Jamari Sharp ends up winning that job opposite Pons. Gandy starts on the bench, and he thrust into the role in a big spot here against Iowa. And look, I thought he played pretty well. Didn't allow any balls over his head, and had a couple of good run support stops there. Got beat on a couple of deep outs, but ultimately, I thought he played well. But again, Coach Haynes has to adjust what he does from a coverage perspective when you don't have D'Angelo Pons. And so that's a big deal there. And the fact that Indiana played as well as they did in that regard, I think speaks volumes about the coaching staff and then about the other veteran players out there. So credit to Rylan Gandy for stepping up when IU really needed him in a pinch and in a tough spot right there. So that was big. Three guys we highlighted last week, I continue to me to elevate their play. That is Mario Blandino, Tyreek Tucker, and Isaiah Jones. I'm telling you now, the three linebacker group, the three linebacker personnel grouping for Indiana is so much fun to watch. It's so much fun to watch, man. I think it also paints a nice picture for the future with IU when this is Aiden Fisher's last year. And then you've got, still mostly young, two young players and Elijah Hardy and Isaiah Jones, like kind of makes you feel good about what's coming down the pipe here. Like these guys are going to be good. They're getting valuable reps this year to step into even bigger roles next year when Fish is gone. But I love seeing all three of them on the field in those two, when the offense goes into 12 personnel, kind of bigger format, bigger personnel groupings. I think you might start forcing teams might just not do that, because Indiana plays so well in those situations. So I thought that was really good. And then up front, Blandino and Tucker especially wrecking ball. Thought you had some big plays from Stephen Dailey in this game as well. Wyatt had a couple of them. I think it was, who was it? Who did I have? Play one. Let's see. Well, let's start here. We'll get back to those guys up front, but Amari Farrell and the safety group has been under some serious scrutiny and criticism throughout the season from Coach Cignetti publicly, and rightfully so. They've had some tough games, but Amari Farrell, I thought, set the tone for the safety group on the very first play, coming up and I think it was a tackle for no gain, but fought through a little bit of mess there to get to the ball carrier for Iowa, and I thought that was big. And then obviously Isaiah Jones with the deflection on the second play, and then Farrell picks it off. Indiana scores. That was great complementary football. Set the tone to me, really both sides of the ball very early on. So I thought that was really cool. But then, man, seeing, I got it starting at play 5 in my notes here. Tuck and Blandino dominant. Tucker on this one, major disruption. I've got Dailey, explosive penetration, a couple of plays later. Play 15, Tucker wrecked the center one-on-one. Play 16, Lou Moore, great open field tackle. I thought really the only place that Iowa found success in the passing game was just kind of like sending guys out just to sit in the middle of zones, right? Just to find a hole in the zone, sit down. Gronowski was going that way. Thought they did that fairly well here, but I think you probably would have seen, Indiana adjust a little bit more coverage-wise if Pons was in the game. Overall, I don't think the pass game really hurt Indiana at all here. So I thought the safeties played a lot better. And then I thought, man, this to me, turn on the tape and you watch this one, and this is how Coach Haynes wants this defense to play. Absolute havoc disruption up front. Let the linebackers and the safeties clean it up on the second and third level. Most of the time on the second level, right? You don't want that sneaking out. But there were bodies. There were bodies on the ground all over the backfield in this one. Tucker, as I mentioned, Blandino, Dailey, Wyatt, Hosea Wheeler in there a number of times. This offensive line for Iowa is so well respected for their discipline, for how well coached they are, for how tough they are. They're maybe a little bit physically limited in terms of movement, but they are strong. And I'd say, I think Indiana's physicality and toughness up front surprised them. That's kind of how it felt to me. Like there were a couple of times where, like here, I've got one, play 25, Dailey wrecking ball, shedding pullers, violent inside, linebackers clean it up. Like that stuff is what this defense is designed to do. So the other thing that I thought was pretty cool is understanding that Iowa is a big play action team. And when I say big, I mean, like, not just because of volume of play action, but because they have traditional play action, right? From under center, quarterback's going to turn his back to the defense. And there were times where Coach Haynes anticipates that and sends, the edge and maybe the third linebacker who's lined up on the line of scrimmage on what we call kind of high rushes, kind of deep rushes to meet the quarterback as soon as he turns around. Man, there was one time, let's see if I can find it. It's like play 22 in the game where they rush high off the edges. Quarterback Gronowski turns around, boom. He had two guys in his face, went down for a big loss. That stuff is awesome. That's just the kind of stuff that Coach Haynes does week in and week out with the way he game plans, the way he uses tendencies and, his knowledge of what the offense wants to do to make those calls in the right spots. And so impressed with that stuff. And then obviously the kicks from Nico in this game, man, in a rowdy environment, in your first road environment of the year, those were huge. So love that. And got to keep that going because you get another violent team up front on the defensive side of the ball in Oregon coming in here, and another tough environment to go into and make kicks and special teams, like all that stuff that they did here. This was a great prep game to go into Autzen Stadium and play an even better team in Oregon. All right. So that's what I wanted to get to on the game there in Iowa City. Any other questions, comments you guys got on that? Hit me up on X at Rhett NFL. I'll throw out a couple of Instagram posts as well, so you can hit me up there. Same tagline. Then just quickly touching on Oregon and Penn State. Man, on the Penn State side of things, I kind of like you feel for them, right? I mean, like this has just been the narrative around Penn State. It's not even a narrative, as Coach Franklin said after the game. It's just fact. They're a good team that just fails to play great in the biggest situations. And it's almost like Drew Aller is the quarterback equivalent of his head coach. Really good, just can't find greatness, right? And I think at this point, you just have to take it for what it is. One of my buddies on SiriusXM, Danny Canal, had a great explanation of this thing too. It's just like, I think at this point, we just have to stop thinking that Drew Aller is going to be more, and just maybe understanding that this is what he is. A really good quarterback that just has a hard time finding and elevating his game when his team really needs it. They did a great job getting back into the game at the end. But again, like you just can't make that throw in overtime. There's 4 Oregon defenders over there. Live to play another day. Didn't do it, right? And so goes the narrative for Penn State over James Franklin's tenure. They can't get over the hump against the best teams. That's the way it's been. For Oregon, I think what you saw was a young quarterback in Dante Moore, who is, in my opinion, along with Fernando Mendoza, the best 2 quarterbacks in this conference, and probably two of the best 3-4 quarterbacks in the country. And that's what you're going to get in 2 weeks at Autzen Stadium. 2 of the best quarterbacks in the country, 2 of the best defenses in the country going at it. And what's going to be the breaking point? But I think Dan Lanning and Curt Cignetti are so similar. Like Lanning is the pop culture version of Curt Cignetti. And I mean that in the highest form of compliment. Like Dan Lanning is Curt Cignetti 30 years ago. Like that's, or if Curt Cignetti was brought up, and in this generation, that Dan Lanning is in, that's what he would be like, right? A little bit brash, a little bit out there in terms of, pushing the right emotional buttons to get your team ready. Maybe, letting the other team have it a little bit from time to time, publicly. He understands it. Millennial Cignetti chiming in. Thank you. Appreciate that. Guys behind the proverbial glass. Yeah. Millennial Cignetti is what Dan Lanning is. That is just, they are so similar. They get their teams ready to play. They know how to push the right buttons, and I cannot wait for that game. All right. I want to bring Peter and Nathan in before we close this thing out, see if they got anything else to add. Boys, what did you guys see from this one? Anything else I missed that stood out to you?
This game could not have come at a better time, in my opinion. Heading into the Oregon game, I think it's important that the Indiana squad got tested now. And now we know these guys have what it takes. They're poised, they're calm under pressure, and then they can make the big plays when we need them. And they didn't really need to do that until much later in the season last year. So I think it's great for the team that can happen now.
I think it's a great point that you make. And I would say this was the game Indiana needed before going to Oregon. Like this was the perfect, I don't want to say warm up because that was that was not a warm up, but like that was because it's going to be taken to another level next time out. Like, this is a game also where I see the growth of the program. Like this is a game I don't know if last year's Indiana team wins, and not to say that I think it's a more talented team. I think it's a better team. I think the offensive line is a little bit better. I thought they were good last year. I think Fernando, and again, one thing I didn't mention, Fernando's mobility in this game was big. Now he took some hits that made me kind of hold my breath a little bit, and I don't want to see that as much moving forward. But I thought when necessary, he made some big time throws. I think Curtis Rourke probably gets sacked a couple more times in that game, and so I think that was huge. And you guys, we talked about this, in our season opener. Here on Big Red Carpet, like Fernando's mobility is going to be something that gives Indiana just another added dimension. All right. Anything else?
Yeah. I just want to go over under the radar play that when I was watching, really stood out to me was Roman Hemby had a 16-yard run right before the half. And I think, had he gotten 2-3 yards there, they probably would have kneeled it out. So instead they were, tied going into the halftime instead of down 3. Just like how important was that, not only for the scoreboard, but also for like the morale of the team.
Great point, because I think last year Cignetti needs it out.
Yeah.
I think he did actually a couple of times last year. I'm trying to remember what game that was really notable for me. And maybe it was Ohio State. I can't remember. But on the road to say, you know what? No, we're going for it.
Yeah.
Right? That was, again, like that to me shows the growth and the trust in the players to execute in those situations from Coach Cignetti, right? Like I think that is a full circle growth moment right there. I'm glad you brought that up. That was great work, Peter, Nathan. The 2 great points that you make in this thing here that highlights where Indiana is as a program now compared to where they were a year ago at this time. And that sets them up really well moving forward into this Oregon game. Great bye week, opportunity to get healthy. I think we get D'Angelo Pons back for Oregon. Maybe season debut for Byron Baldwin, true freshman. I don't know. I imagine he's getting closer. That'll be a tough place to come in and make your season debut as a true freshman. But to be able to work him in, second half of the season, if all things continue to go well, I think will be useful for that secondary to get some added depth. But overall, really encouraged, boys. Thanks for taking the ride here in the big red carpet with me. This has been a fun episode, and we look forward to coming back with you. We will have another episode, even with there's no IU game this weekend. Another episode for you coming up next Monday, and we'll go in depth on the Oregon Ducks. Look forward to doing that for you. Be sure to check me out at Rhett NFL on X and Instagram. We'll have some more clips of the game, put them out for you there until we can bring them back to you right here. So thanks a bunch for being with us. I'm Rhett Lewis. Thanks to Peter, Nathan, Galen, everybody here at the Back Home Network for continuing to support Big Red Carpet. And we look forward to chiming in with you guys on YouTube. And I appreciate those comments, man. Those comments are awesome. I try to get in there and answer as many of them as possible. So keep those coming, and we'll keep the conversation rolling. All right. Have a great week, everybody. Go Hoosiers.